session. So I go back to my Excel sheet. So in Excel sheet, I have a, say for example, before I do here, if I want to block the range of cells, I can also block it using this icon here, the cells format. So here, if I click here, you can see a protect sheet. I have to protect it before I lock the cell. So I can lock and then I can unlock as well. So this also is available. You can use this as well. Apart from review protect sheet. So without protecting, locking will not have an effect. So I need to first protect the sheet, then only I can lock the cells as well. Right? So this is available for you to use. So today we will move ahead with charts. When we move with charts, there are several types of charts available. If I go to insert, you can see now this is my bar graph. We generally call it as bar graph, line graph, pie chart. So horizontal bar graph, this is vertical bar, this is horizontal bar. So horizontal bar graph, area graph. So we have several types of graph available, right? So you can use any of these charts for our managing the graphical representation of data. So chart is nothing but graphical representation of data. So if I have to do this, for example, I'll go with a simple bar chart. As usual, I use the column name. This is one y-axis, one x-axis. So y-axis is amount, x-axis is say name. So I say A, B, C, D, E. I have values here 100, 115, 120, 130, 140. I have these values. I like to put it in graph, right? So to make this as a graph, first select the data that you want to use it for a graph. Select the data. Once you select the data, click on the type of graph that you want to use. In column graph itself, you have multiple graphs. You have simple graph, you have a group with group, that is we'll see later. First is, we'll go with the simple graph, 2D graph, 3D graph, cylindrical format, cone format, pyramid format. Each of this we will try to see now. First is I'll go with the simple horizontal vertical bar graph. So now as soon as I click it, you can see the graph here. Right? So the values of y-axis 0 to 160, it is automatically, he has captured, he has automatically taken this value based on what you have seen it over here. So he assigns the value to this axis based on the data that we select. Right? So if I want y-axis, so if it is x-axis, you can see that x-axis also takes the value here. So the value of name comes to the x-axis. I want to interchange this values. So I want x into y, y into x. Switch the values. So I want A here, amount here. So each graph is A, B, C, D, E, F. Right? Green color is C, A is the first color, etc., etc. So I can interchange the values as well. Switch rows into columns, columns into rows. Right? I can manage that as well. So this is simple graph. I can put this graph in the same sheet. I can put this graph in another sheet. I can do in any way I like. Now assume that I have multiple values. One is amount. Another is I have maybe a discount. Or I'll call it as say quantity. Quantity is 10, 15, 20, 25, 45. This is my quantity, right? I like to now redraw this graph. I like to redraw this graph. Come to insert, column, redraw the graph. Now you can see this graph, the previous graph, and you have seen here. I want to delete that previous graph. Select the graph, click on delete button, that gets deleted. Right? So here you can see now there is a bar graph, amount, quantity. Amount is shown with the blue color, quantity is shown over here. So this is, now we call it as a bar graph, but two datas. I can have multiple datas now. That's not an issue at all. So this is simple bar graph with data that has been, each data is one bar. Each of the data set is one bar. Right? Now I like to have a group here. Insert. Say I'll say group. So this group belongs to A1, A1, A1. This is B1, B1. I have a data like this. So how the graph look like? Let us see how the graph look like. I go to insert, I go to column with the group data. Compare the contribution of each value of a total across categories by using the vertical. Right? So here quantity and amount. You can see here A1, these three are A1s, and ABB. You can see here now quantity, series quantity point A1A, value is 10. This is quantity. Amount, this is amount. So this is A1A. So I am grouping the data now like this as well. So I want to change the data, right? Select the data set, you can change the data here. So you want to choose the data set, you can choose the data set. So this is the data set he has chosen, right? So I can group it as well. So by default, he uses his self-intelligence to manage the data. So it is not that we are doing something over here as of now. We are not doing anything over here. Automatically he manages the data, right? So I can switch the columns into names. I can do anything as I wish. So this is now how he applies the group within the same candidate. So these three are A1s. This is A, B, B, C, etc., etc. So the quantity amount is stacked over here. This is stacking. Instead of individual graph, you are stacking the graph. You can change the style of the graph as well. So the style of the graph, you can change it, that is chart styles. I can change it in any of the style that I like. If I have one more value, that also will get grouped onto this chart. So the value of each value is shown in the top. So value is 45. Here the value is 140. So here it is showing as a total value. This is because we have selected the data chart type. I right click, change chart type. We have selected here this chart. If I selected this chart, I say OK here. You can see now the chart looks like this, right? So if I again change the change chart type, I want to make it as cone. I can make it as cone. You can see now how the graph look like. I have not done anything. I just, data is there. I am telling QTP to do the, I am telling Excel sheet to do the plotting as per the data that we have. So we can use whichever the model that we want to use, right? So this is chart type. I can have the chart series, we want to change it. You can change it, right? Select data, 3D rotation, add data labels, format data series. I can change the data series as well. Shape, what is the shape you want? Now it is full cone. You want partial cone, right? You want cylinder. So you can change it to cylinder as well. So the graph that you select, you can change one cylinder, one other is cone. You can see, notice that. Because we have selected that kind of a chart. If I choose entire chart and then change chart type, I can now change it to cylinder as well. So now this is cylinder. The entire chart is changed to cylinder. So we can change the chart in the way we like the chart to appear, right? So you have a style, chart style, you have simple grouping as well. So this is also available. So in this chart, what is the objective of this chart is to have a better so-called graphical representation, better feel, right? It catches the eye. That is the reason. Now I slightly make a different data set here using a pivot table. How do we manage a data? So I go to sheet 2. I have a here month, right? I'll say here year, month, date, then name, amount, right? I have it like this. Or I don't want a name, that's fine. I don't need a name, I'll leave it out. So now first is I'll put here 1st November 2013. Here I call it as amount is say 100. I keep the amount between 100 and 150. 2nd November 2013. I drag and drop to these entire days. November 30th I have put it. Excuse me. So I just copy the value, I randomly change the value between two of the entries or three entries, say 103, 105, 110, 200, 150, 160, 120, 110, that's all. So I have changed some values. I changed some values over here, right? So then I call this as November data. This is November 2013. I copy this same everywhere and I call this year as 2013. So it is like a grouping now. I have a grouping, right? And in this group, first is year, second is month, third is date, fourth is amount. I like this to be drawn as a graph. So how normal graph will look like, how pivot chart will look like, we'll see both. So I now select this graph data. I call this as now insert. I now go to the pie chart or line chart. Let me go to the line chart. I just draw this line. So this is how the graph look like. So each date he has drawn the graph, the values to the left hand side. I can increase the graph height or width. I can increase the graph width. I can increase the graph height. Right? I can do whatever I want. So this is how it looks like. But I don't want this November data. I want only monthly data. So I can always select data. I can always say edit, right? I call this as I choose the data here. Only November. I chose the data over here, right? I appear it over here. So he is now putting it as November. It is each date, but November is coming here. So it is not also what we expected, right? So even though the data seems to be right, but it is not as we want. Because we wanted to say is consolidated amount of a November, not an individual data. So that is what we want. So to do that, we call it as a pivoting. So that is what we seen it as a pivoting. I go to the original size of the graphs. So this is called pivoting of table. So how to do it? As we know the pivoting to be done, go to insert. You have a pivot table. I am going to pivot it to the new, right? I am going to pivot it to the new sheet. Select pivot table. Instead of pivot table, pivot chart. Pivot chart, selected range, here selected, right? Okay. Then here I am choosing what I want. Here I am not allowing him to choose. I am choosing what I want. I want month, drag and drop to the axis field. Values here, and it is sum of amount. You can see now the graph the way it is being presented. Are you able to follow this? So I want year. Right? You can see the year below. Right? So the graph value is based on that particular data set we have. It is automatically taking care of the sum or grouping. So he automatically takes care. Right? I want a different chart. I want a pie chart. Let us take another example here. The same thing. I will take it as November. I also do it for December. 1st December 2013. I range this from 90. I drag and drop this. So I have it for 31 January, December. So I choose the value here. So maybe 120, 80, 50, 130, 140, 180, 30, 95, 105. Some values I am just changing it. There is no relevance to these values anyway. Right? So I have changed the values now. 90 being the base. Right? So now I have changed this value. I want to now do the pivot, same pivot chart. I am going to do now. So this is November, this is December 2013. So it is 2013. Right? I copy this to all the columns. I do the same pivot chart, or I can do here. I remove this year now, only the month. So only the month, we are seeing it over here. Now what I do is I refresh this. Refresh this data. right? I refresh this data. So month, it is only showing November now. Refresh all. Again it is showing November. Graph data. Month is selected. So I'll do one thing. I will redraw the data, that is easier. So I choose here. I call it as insert pivot table. Right, I have selected the entire row. New sheet. Okay. I put the drag and drop the month. Amount, I drag and drop to so it is not pivot table, it is pivot chart. So I go to insert, pivot chart, that's okay, new sheet, that's fine. Month, amount. Now you can see November and December are appearing. It's perfect. So one is showing us around 3000 value, another is doing the amount, right? So we are now able to get this value. It is between month and a year. I don't want month, I want year wise. In pivot table it is easy to do that, right? Assume that I have a next year 2014 as well. Say January data I'll include here, right? So I'll put now say 1st Jan 2013. I make it as here as 120 as a base value. So I copy this till 31st Jan. I copy this. So it is not 13, it is 14 now. So I put it as 14. Now I call this as 13, 27, 28, 31. So January appearing. Base is 120. I copy this. I change the values. That's it. So I just change some values. Now I copy this as 2014 here. This is January 2014. Now we have two datas. Copy this, put it over here. Now I have three datas. Let me just go here. I'll do a refresh all. Whether it is refreshing or not, we'll just check. Refresh all. Refresh. Graph is not changing. January is not being included. Right? Refresh all. Again graph is not changing. Even though we have done the refresh. Right? Maybe it may be a bug or it is how the feature is. I am not sure. It is supposed to refresh, but it is not refreshing. To redo this, what I do, I need to go back to insert, pivot table, or not pivot table, it is pivot chart, right? Chosen the values, all the values are selected, month wise, amount. So you can see now January 2014 also appears here. If I want year wise data, I can put the year wise data as well. So this is my year wise data. So this facility is available with pivot table. So you can get the consolidated value refreshed. Right? New column having a difficulty to insert, but existing column value, if I have a change the column value, for example here, I change the value here, say 100 to 120 here. So 20 is changed in November, right? In sheet 7, if I use refresh all, the value is changed. That's no issues. Whereas if I introduce new filter component, new month or new, then it is having a difficulty. For downloading the SOTA tool, it is available in the PowerPoint. There is a link. That link you have to use for downloading the SOTA tool, right? So you can contact a person called Bharadwaj in Skype and then you get that resolved. So you can send a mail to Bharadwaj or Subramaniam and get it resolved. That is easiest way to resolve this issue, right? So get data. So if it is a data, it is very easy for you to automatically the refresh takes care of the change. But when we are introducing a new report values, it is not getting changed. The datas are not getting changed, right? So now the next is, if I want month wise, I can always select the month, put the month over here, I get the month here. So November, December, January. I want to filter, I want year wise, but I want month to be in the report filter. So I want to filter this month, then I can choose the month here. In 2013, November, how much values has come, right? So in filter, if I want multiple select item, November and January, how the values are represented, right? So you can use any of this method. One is filter, you have a filter available. Now I am doing a filter through month. So monthly I can filter